The city of Rome stands still, the evening sky bruised in hues of violet and crimson. The air is thick, heavy with the scent of the Tiber's flow, its waters dark and unfathomable. You can hear the low hum of distant voices, a murmur growing louder as the sun dips lower, casting long shadows that stretch like fingers across the ancient stones of the Forum. This is a city accustomed to power, to empire, to greatness. But tonight, the streets tremble. There is something else in the air, something you cannot quite grasp, yet you know it's there, lingering in the space between every breath. A procession moves through the streets, heads bowing in reverence as the figure at its center strides forward. Caligula. His face, young but fierce, seems etched with purpose. He is everything they've dreamed of, a new ruler to bring them out of the darkness. The crowd roars, and you can feel the warmth of their bodies, the heat of their breath. They call him a savior, their emperor, the one who will restore the greatness of Rome. You hear the promise in his voice as he speaks of glory, of an empire unchallenged, of stability to heal the wounds of the past. But there's something else, something you cannot ignore. His gaze shifts, a fleeting moment of uncertainty that betrays the calm exterior he wears so carefully. Beneath the grandeur of his promises, something darker stirs. It isn't visible to them, but you can feel it. A shift in the very air around him, like the first crack of thunder before the storm. As the people cheer, you cannot shake the feeling that this is not the rise of a ruler, but the beginning of something much darker. A man who will soon come to rule not just with strength, but with terror. The path he will carve through history will not be one of peace, but of brutality. His reign, once filled with promises of prosperity, will be tainted with cruelty so deep that it will haunt the empire for generations. You sense it now, the calm before the storm. In the coming days, you will see a man's transformation unfold, from the hope of a people to the nightmare of an empire. A ruler so consumed by power that he will change the course of history forever. And as you stand in this moment, caught between the cheers of the crowd and the quiet, unspoken dread, you realize one thing: the rise of Caligula is only the beginning. If you think this is just another ruler's tale, wait till you see what happens next. Subscribe to Grim Histories and join us as we dive into the mind of a ruler who made brutality his trademark. If you're still watching and haven't subscribed, let us know why you're choosing not to. Don't worry, we'll read every excuse you leave in the comments. The first crack in the facade of Caligula's reign appears like a fleeting shadow, unnoticed by the adoring masses, yet unmistakable in its terrifying implications. In the private corridors of his palace, away from the crowds and the applause, something stirs within him. The promises of greatness, those promises made to the people, begin to unravel, like a fraying rope under the weight of his own mind. You feel the shift, the creeping discomfort. Caligula, once the symbol of hope for Rome, now begins to show the first signs of the madness that will define his reign. The first act, the first wound inflicted upon the empire, is not political, but personal. His sister, Drusilla, the one person he trusts, the one person who has walked with him through the shadows of his childhood, is the first to feel the weight of his unraveling psyche. The bond between them, once sacred and unspoken, takes on a disturbing form. It isn't simply affection that binds them, but something darker, more primal. His obsession with her grows, slipping into an abyss from which there is no return. The whispers of their relationship ripple through the empire, though they are hushed, whispered only in the deepest chambers. The public will never know the truth, but the brutality of Caligula's affection for Drusilla can be felt in the cold silence that follows her untimely death. The empire mourns her passing, but the true horror lies not in her death, but in what Caligula does next. He elevates her to a goddess, a divine being, and orders the creation of temples in her name. Her statues are placed alongside the gods, her image revered. In his grief, he attempts to turn his sister into something immortal, something beyond human, as if the very act of divinizing her could transcend the grief he feels, as though he could somehow control the universe by bending it to his will. It is the first sign of his deep psychological fracture, the belief that he is not only above mortals, but above the laws of life and death. And then, the cruelty that will define his rule becomes not just personal, but public. Caligula's next act of madness isn't just a private affair. It's a spectacle, a twisted performance for all of Rome to see. His horse, Incitatus, is named consul. Yes, consul, the highest political office in the Roman Republic. He lavishes his horse with a marble stable, a jeweled collar, and even a seat at the table of power. The Senate, the body that should hold power, is reduced to a farce. Incitatus, this mere animal, is elevated above them all. Caligula's cruelty lies not only in this absurdity, but in the scorn he heaps upon those who would dare to question him. By making his horse a consul, he does not just mock the Senate, he mocks the very concept of governance itself, the idea that anyone is worthy of respect or power. It is an act of domination, of humiliation, a reminder to all that Caligula is beyond their reach, beyond their comprehension. And yet, in the midst of this madness, there is something more chilling, the possibility that this cruelty isn't born of whim, but of something deeper. A trauma that has followed him from the very moment of his childhood, when he was held hostage in the court of Tiberius, left to be manipulated, to be shaped and broken. Was this madness inherited, passed down through the bloodline of the Julio-Claudian dynasty? Or was it the result of his years of suffering, of being a pawn in the power struggles of the empire? Was Caligula a product of his environment, of the cruel forces that shaped him into the monster he would become? You can almost feel the weight of his experiences, the agony of a child forced to watch the world through the lens of powerlessness. The trauma of being raised in the shadow of Tiberius, the man who saw him as nothing more than a tool, a weapon to be used and discarded, has molded Caligula into something unrecognizable. The seeds of his madness were planted long before he ever took the throne. The trauma of being a hostage, the manipulation, the control, all of it has festered in his mind, taking root in ways even he cannot understand. He doesn't see himself as a victim, no, he sees himself as the ultimate victor, the one who will impose his will on the world in ways no one has ever dared to before. His mind, shattered by years of mental and emotional abuse, has found its outlet in cruelty, in the subjugation of all those around him. He becomes the embodiment of power, not through strength, but through fear. His actions, his commands, are the outward manifestations of a soul that has been twisted, deformed by the horrors of his youth. But as Rome watches, as they cheer his every move, there is a growing sense of unease, a sense that something terrible is coming, something none of them can stop. They have witnessed the rise of a ruler, yes, but they have yet to see the monster that he will become. This is just the beginning, trust me. If you're shocked by these first acts, hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss the next twist. And if you're not subscribing yet, let's hear why you refuse to see history the right way. It's getting darker, don't miss out. The true nature of Caligula's cruelty emerges like a dark, suffocating cloud, slowly enveloping the empire, blotting out any remnants of hope, justice, or mercy. Power, once a gift to the people, is now a weapon. A weapon that Caligula wields with terrifying precision, using it not just to rule, but to break, to destroy, to inflict suffering with an almost artistic obsession. In his eyes, each person is nothing more than a puppet to be manipulated, a body to be used, twisted, and discarded when it no longer serves its purpose. You stand in the middle of the Colosseum, but this is no ordinary day of entertainment. The crowd, filled with the usual excitement, is a mixture of fear and anticipation. The sun beats down, hot and oppressive, as the sounds of cheering and jeering echo around the arena. But today, there is no joy, no exhilaration in the bloodshed. The cries of the prisoners, forced to fight for their lives in the sand, are not those of warriors, but of men who know they are already dead. Their limbs shake, their eyes wide with terror, as they are pushed into the center of the arena. And yet, they are not given the honor of dying swiftly. No. Caligula watches with cold detachment as their deaths unfold like a slow, agonizing performance. This is not simply a gladiatorial game. This is a spectacle of suffering, a performance designed to amuse a ruler whose soul has long since departed from any semblance of humanity. Caligula is not interested in the honor of a fair fight, He is interested in control, in watching the slow unraveling of those who defy him. For those who have crossed him, the arena is only the beginning. The true torment lies in the anticipation, the moments before the final act, when they know they are about to face their end. But even in their deaths, they will not escape his cruelty. Caligula does not simply execute his enemies, he transforms death into a grotesque art. Those who oppose him in the Senate, the wealthy and powerful, the once proud men who thought themselves untouchable, are subjected to the most harrowing fates. Their lives are snuffed out not with mercy, but with grotesque creativity, designed to not just punish them, but to humiliate them, to break their spirits before the final blow. One by one, the senators fall. Each one a victim of Caligula's sickening need to control, to show that no one, no matter how powerful, can escape his reach. He watches, detached, as their bodies are paraded before the public, twisted in ways that leave no dignity intact. The executions are public, yes, but not in the way you might expect. They are not simple displays of justice. They are performances, designed to feed Caligula's ego, to showcase his absolute dominance over life and death. His cruelty knows no bounds. A man's execution is not simply an end, but a calculated show of power. Senators, once the pillars of Roman society, are reduced to mere pawns in a game that they never agreed to play. You see it now, the madness in full bloom. Caligula has made the death of his enemies an act of theater. He revels in it. He delights in their suffering, feeding off their fear like a beast intoxicated by blood. His cruelty becomes more innovative, more twisted with each passing day. He orders men to be thrown into pools of blood, drowning in their own agony. He dismembers prisoners, making them endure the slow, painful destruction of their bodies in front of an audience, all for the amusement of the mad emperor. And then there are the executions that are not meant to kill quickly, but to prolong suffering. To make sure that those who defied him, those who thought they could stand against the tide, are not just punished, but broken, ground into the dirt beneath his heel. The cruelty reaches its peak when he forces his enemies to perform before their deaths. These men, once powerful, once untouchable, are reduced to mere puppets in Caligula's cruel theater. They are forced to dance, to entertain him, knowing that the moment their performance ends, their lives will follow. He watches them struggle, watches them break in the face of inevitable death. And in that moment, there is no mercy, no reprieve. There is only the knowledge that their suffering is his pleasure. As the games continue, Caligula's madness deepens. His punishments become more elaborate, more horrific. The line between life and death blurs. The very act of living becomes a punishment, a reminder that under his rule, no one is safe. Not even the most powerful, the most revered. It is not just the physical pain that breaks his enemies, but the psychological torment. The terror of knowing that no matter what they do, they cannot escape. Their fates are sealed, their bodies will be twisted and destroyed, but worse still, they are left with the knowledge that their torment is not just punishment, but entertainment for a man who sees them as nothing more than tools for his amusement. This is the true face of Caligula's cruelty. It is not just about death. It is about control, about turning his enemies into broken, terrified creatures before their final breath. He does not simply punish them. He destroys them, piece by piece, until there is nothing left but the remnants of their once proud selves. He makes them suffer, not just in body, but in spirit. This is where the horror kicks into full gear, and you're still not subscribed. What's stopping you from seeing the whole truth? Go ahead, leave your reason in the comments while we continue. It's about to get much darker. The empire begins to tremble, not from the weight of external enemies, but from the rot within. Caligula, once hailed as the savior of Rome, has turned the full force of his cruelty not only against his enemies but against the very fabric of the empire itself. His madness does not remain contained within the walls of his palace or the arena, it spills outward, infecting everything it touches. You can feel it in the air, thick with tension. The once vibrant city now feels oppressive, its streets choked with the whispers of distrust and fear. The Senate, the body entrusted with the weight of Rome's governance, is no longer a place of order. It has become a playground for Caligula's sadism. The men who once served as the pillars of Roman power now cower in fear, their every word and action scrutinized under the gaze of a mad emperor who sees betrayal in every shadow. He alienates them one by one, stripping them of their dignity and their position, until the Senate is no more than a broken institution, a hollow shell of what it once was. The Senate is not the only casualty of Caligula's rule. His relationship with the military, once his strongest support, begins to sour. The men who fought for Rome, the men who bled for its glory, are now treated as expendable. Caligula demands complete loyalty, a loyalty that borders on worship. But loyalty is not something that can be commanded, not when it is demanded so cruelly. The Praetorian Guard, once his protectors, now find themselves torn between loyalty to their emperor and the growing realization that they serve a madman. The rift between Caligula and his guards grows, and with it, the seeds of his eventual downfall. You sense the fragility of it all, the delicate balance between control and chaos that Caligula has destroyed. His paranoia consumes him like a disease. No one is safe. Not even those closest to him. His own family is torn apart by his erratic cruelty. His cousins, once his allies, are now targets of suspicion, their loyalty questioned at every turn. His relationships with his own blood become fractured, poisoned by his inability to trust even those he loves. He has no allies left, no one to turn to but himself, and it is in this isolation that his mind truly begins to unravel. In his final years, Caligula retreats further into his madness. His empire, once a mighty force, is consumed by internal strife. The stability he promised is nowhere to be found. His once grand visions for Rome have become delusions, distorted by the tyranny he has unleashed. His rule, once filled with promises of greatness, now collapses under the weight of his own psychosis. The emperor's paranoia grows more extreme with each passing day. He sees enemies everywhere. In the halls of his palace, in the streets of Rome, even in the very eyes of those who kneel before him in supplication. His delusions of grandeur and omnipotence become his undoing, as he believes himself to be a god, above even the laws of nature. But a god can only hold power for so long before the cracks begin to show. His once loyal subjects, the men and women who once adored him, now see him for what he truly is, a man who has lost his mind and with it, the stability of the empire. In the final days of his reign, the walls close in around him. His paranoia leads him to make desperate decisions, each more erratic than the last. He exiles senators, orders executions on a whim, and surrounds himself with those who will tell him only what he wants to hear. The empire, once vibrant and strong, is crumbling beneath the weight of his insanity. His once iron grip on Rome has turned to dust, and the very men who once swore loyalty to him now conspire behind closed doors, plotting the end of his reign. It is the Praetorian Guard, the very men who once served as his protectors, who strike the final blow. Their betrayal is swift, calculated, and inevitable. In the dead of night, they move to end the reign of Caligula, the mad emperor who has brought the empire to the brink of collapse. The assassination is brutal, a violent end to a reign built on terror. It is a death that comes not from the sword of a foreign enemy, but from the hands of those closest to him, a fitting end to the tyrant who turned Rome into a battlefield of the mind. As the news spreads through the city, there is no celebration, no sense of relief. There is only the eerie silence of an empire unsure of what comes next. The terror of Caligula's reign has left its mark on Rome, a city forever scarred by the madness of one man. His death does not signal the rebirth of Rome, but the beginning of its healing, a healing that will take decades, centuries even, to fully realize. This is the inevitable downfall of absolute power. Still, no subscription. You could be learning about history's greatest tyrants instead of wondering what you're missing. Why not make your voice heard in the comments? Let us know why you're avoiding the truth. Caligula is dead, but the shadow he cast over Rome stretches far beyond the confines of his reign. In the aftermath of his assassination, there is no relief, no sense of closure. Instead, a dark and heavy silence falls over the empire, broken only by the whispers of what could have been and the uncertainty of what comes next. The streets of Rome are still filled with the echoes of his cruelty, the tremors of his madness vibrating in the hearts of those who once served him. The immediate consequences of his death are swift, chaotic. His successors, handpicked by the Praetorian Guard, are weak, indecisive, and haunted by the same fears that plagued Caligula in his final years. The empire, left in the hands of those who were not ready to rule, begins to unravel. It is a time of instability, a time when Rome, once a beacon of power, now finds itself struggling to regain its footing. The very fabric of the Roman imperial system has been torn apart, shredded by the actions of one man who thought himself beyond reproach. For a brief moment, Caligula's death brings the promise of a return to normalcy. But there is no such thing. The damage he inflicted upon Rome cannot be undone by a mere change of leadership. The empire is left fractured, its institutions discredited, its people fearful of what lies ahead. Caligula's reign, which once promised a new era of glory, has instead left a legacy of terror, distrust, and corruption. His successors, men who are little more than shadows of th. The empire is not restored by their feeble attempts, it is only further fractured. But the true legacy of Caligula's rule is not just the immediate political fallout. It is the lasting imprint he leaves on the very psyche of Rome. His reign becomes a cautionary tale, not just for the empire, but for the ages. The story of Caligula is one that reverberates through history, shaping how we view the nature of power, tyranny, and madness. It is a story that continues to haunt us, not just because of the brutality Caligula inflicted, but because of the chilling realization that such madness can be contained within a single individual, a single man who wields power with a sense of divine right. His actions, once thought to be the result of sheer cruelty, now seem more like a manifestation of a mind so broken by the weight of power that it turned inward, consuming itself. Caligula's madness, it seems, was not simply an aberration of the time. It was a symptom of something deeper, something that lurks in the heart of power itself. As historians sift through the ruins of Caligula's reign, they are faced with the question, was Caligula truly mad, or was he simply a product of his environment? The lines blur. Some say he was a psychopath, a man who used his power to fulfill his darkest desires. Others argue that he was the victim of a system that, in its pursuit of absolute control, twisted him into a monster. Was he the architect of his own madness, or was he a pawn in the hands of a broken empire? The debate rages on, but one thing is certain, Caligula's reign is a mirror, reflecting the darkest aspects of power, of control, and of human nature. Modern psychology offers its own perspective. The traits displayed by Caligula, his narcissism, his paranoia, his cruelty, are unmistakable markers of a psychopathic personality. Yet, there is something more to his story, something that transcends the traditional labels of madness. Caligula's actions cannot be understood in isolation, they must be seen in the context of the empire he ruled. He was not born evil, but made so by a system that demanded obedience at any cost, by a world that stripped him of his humanity and remade him in its image. The empire itself, with its thirst for conquest and domination, fed his paranoia and inflated his ego, creating a man who believed he was invincible, untouchable, above all others. This is where the true horror of Caligula's reign lies, not in the execution of his enemies, not in the cruelty of his punishments, but in the realization that he was a reflection of the empire he ruled. A reflection of Rome's insatiable hunger for power, its corrupting influence, its inability to recognize the humanity of those who served it. Caligula did not create the empire, he only exposed its darkest truths. As we look back on Caligula's legacy, we are forced to confront the uncomfortable reality that his story is not just the story of a mad emperor. It is the story of all those who have wielded absolute power, all those who have succumbed to the corrupting influence of authority. His reign, for all its madness, is a warning that echoes through the corridors of history, reminding us of the dangers of unchecked power, of the fragility of civilization, and of the darkness that lies within us all. But the legacy of Caligula is not just academic. It is cultural. His name has become synonymous with tyranny, with madness, with the abuses of power. When we speak of modern tyrants, we speak of Caligula. His actions, his cruelty, have become the standard by which all other despots are measured. In our collective consciousness, his name evokes not just fear, but fascination. His story has become a myth, a dark legend that continues to captivate the imagination of those who seek to understand the nature of power and the limits of human cruelty. And as historians continue to examine his reign, the questions remain. How much of Caligula's madness was truly his own, and how much was the product of the empire that made him? How much of his cruelty was born of his own broken psyche, and how much was simply the inevitable consequence of absolute power? Caligula's legacy is not just a lesson for the past. It is a cautionary tale for the present, and for the future. It is a reminder that power, when unchecked, can transform even the most promising of leaders into something monstrous. It is a warning that the greatest threats to civilization do not always come from the outside. Sometimes, they come from within. We've uncovered the full scale of Caligula's madness, and you're still not subscribed? Don't be the one left out. You have the power to change that. Drop your excuses in the comments. But for now, I'm sure you can understand why this story is so important. Caligula's reign has ended, but the echoes of his brutality ripple through the centuries, whispering a dark warning to those who dare to listen. The story of this mad emperor is not merely a tale of ancient Rome, it is a tale that transcends time, a story woven into the very fabric of power, corruption, and the human psyche. It is a cautionary tale that, though set in the distant past, remains eerily relevant to the present day. As you reflect on Caligula's madness, one truth becomes undeniable: absolute power is a dangerous thing. The very structure that was supposed to protect the empire, the Senate, the military, and the people, became the tools by which Caligula imposed his will. It was not the strength of his armies, nor the grandeur of his empire that solidified his rule, but the unrelenting force of his cruelty, the constant reminder to all that no one was safe, not even the most powerful in the land. Caligula's descent into madness was not the result of a single act or a single event. It was the accumulation of years spent trapped in the machinery of an empire that had no place for mercy, for empathy, or for compassion. He was not simply a product of his environment, he was a victim of it. The trauma he endured as a child, locked away in the courts of Tiberius, powerless, humiliated, and manipulated, shaped the man he would become. But in his quest for control, in his pursuit of vengeance, he became something far worse, a monster, not just of Rome, but of human nature itself. The psychological effects of trauma cannot be underestimated. Caligula's reign shows us the devastating power of unchecked psychological scars. The empire he ruled, once the pinnacle of civilization, was shattered by a mind broken beyond repair. His madness, once hidden behind the facade of youthful promise, spread through the empire like a virus. It was not just his cruelty that left its mark, but the psychological toll his reign took on Rome itself. The fear, the distrust, the paranoia, it all became a part of the very air people breathed, a constant reminder that even the mightiest empire could be brought to its knees by the madness of one man. But the lessons of Caligula's reign are not confined to the past. They continue to resonate today, serving as a stark warning to those in power. Caligula's story is a reminder that no one is immune to the corrupting influence of power, no matter how noble their intentions may seem at first. It is a reminder that the unchecked pursuit of control, without limits or accountability, can warp even the most capable minds into something monstrous. In a world that continues to grapple with the abuse of power, the lessons of Caligula's madness remain painfully relevant. Modern-day tyrants, those who seek to rule with an iron fist, who silence dissent and crush opposition, are not so different from the emperor who once terrorized Rome. Their power is built on the same foundation, the belief that they are untouchable, above reproach, and beyond the reach of any check on their authority. We must ask ourselves, then, how much of Caligula's madness still exists within our systems of governance? How often do we place individuals in positions of absolute power, and what safeguards do we have in place to prevent them from following the same path that led to Caligula's ruin? The importance of checks and balances in governance cannot be overstated. It is not enough to simply place power in the hands of the few. We must ensure that there are mechanisms in place to hold them accountable, to remind them that they are not above the law, that they are not immune to the consequences of their actions. Caligula's reign teaches us that no system, no matter how powerful, is immune to corruption. When power is left unchecked, when those in control are allowed to operate without oversight, the result is chaos, violence, and destruction. The empire Caligula ruled may have crumbled in his wake, but the lessons of his reign live on, reminding us that power, when abused, will always lead to ruin. As you stand at the crossroads of history, you must ask yourself, what lessons can we draw from Caligula's brutality? How can we ensure that the mistakes of the past are not repeated? How can we, as a society, safeguard against the rise of another tyrant, another ruler who believes they are above the law, above morality, above humanity itself? In the end, the story of Caligula is not just a story of ancient Rome. It is the story of power's dark side, of the psychological toll it takes on those who wield it, and of the consequences of allowing that power to go unchecked. It is a reminder that the abuse of power is not just a threat to the individuals it touches, but to the very fabric of civilization itself. This is the part where history has its say. Subscribe to Grim Histories to ensure you never miss an important tale from the past. If you're still skeptical, I'm sure the comments section will be a great place for you to vent your reason for not joining us.